Resourceful Designer, episode 69. Be the expert everyone thinks you are.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing.
And now, your host. He was the backup soccer goalie in high school, but he never played a single game. Mark DeCote.
Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so happy that you've been able to join me today as we discuss improving our graphic design businesses. Now, I'm covering a topic today that kind of hits a little bit home with me because I've been seeing it over and over, and just lately in a lot of Facebook groups and online places, I've been seeing this brought up recently. And it's people cringing at the idea of being called an expert. So I want to tackle that topic today. But before I get to that, I like to share a little bit of what's been happening in my design life. And I've got a really interesting project come into me this week. Somebody contacted me with a referral from a local sign shop. They've got a brand new boat that they're going to be launching in about a month or so. And they want me to design the logo. They want their name on the boat, but not just in a standard font. They want an actual logo put onto the boat. So I've talked to him and we're coming up with an idea. And it's just interesting. I've done automobiles. I've done full car wraps. I've done stuff to go onto race cars, but I've never done anything to go on a boat before. So it's kind of interesting. I told him I probably can't touch this project for another possibly 2 weeks, maybe 3, but it's been stewing in my mind so much that I might end up moving that one forward because it looks like a real fun one to work on. And you know how those fun jobs are when they're that way, you want to get to them, you want to work on them. And I'm starting to feel that way about that one. So who knows, I might move that one up. Now, complete flip side, something that happened to me this morning is a client of mine who I designed a website a couple of years ago. And when we designed it, I'd put a form on there where they can collect email addresses so that people can sign up for their newsletter. Now, it wasn't hooked up to anything like Aweber or MailChimp or Constant Contact. It was just a simple form that would email them the email address, and the man from the store was just going to accumulate, keep track of all these email addresses until they were ready to go. Well, they've been doing this for well over a year now. And finally this morning, they told me, Mark, can you please remove that link from our website? And I asked him, I says, well, why are you not using that? They says, well, no, we've decided after all this time that we don't want to do a newsletter. We don't want to do anything like that. And we're tired of the hundreds of emails we get every month with people asking to subscribe. And I asked him, I says, what do you mean hundreds? And he says, well, over the past year, we've been keeping track, and every time we get one, we put it in an Excel spreadsheet. Well, we have over 12,000 email addresses, and we're getting tired of receiving all of these. I was just floored. Here is a company. This is a brick and mortar store. Actually, I'll tell you, it's a shoe store. And this store has had over 12,000 people request to join their mailing list to get stuff from them. And they have never once sent an email out to these people and have no intention. And quote unquote, they said, it just sounds like too much trouble. Anyways, it's those type of clients that you just shake your head at. And no matter how much you try to convince them, they just won't listen. And you just shrug your shoulders, shake your head at them, and do what they ask. So I removed that link this morning from their website. Go figure. So it's been a topsy-turvy week for me so far. And now, like I do every episode, I want to share a resource of the week. Resource tip. I keep flipping back and forth. Well, this week it is a resource. And this resource is an application. And I'm sorry, this is a Mac-only application called Espresso. Now, Espresso is put out by a company called MacRabbit. And it is a web editor. It's for, you can do your coding and all that. Actually, if I read the description right from the website, it says it's the web editor for Mac for people who make delightful, innovative, and fast websites in an app to match. Espresso helps you write, code, design, build, and publish with flair and efficiency. Sophisticated text features, amazing live preview with browser X-ray, CSS edit tools, the Navigator, Dynamo auto building, and server sync. Whether you're starting from scratch or tweaking a live site, Espresso has you covered. So that's the description that they have on their website. Now, I have to tell you that Espresso is the program that I use. I used to use, years ago, I was using Adobe Go Live to build my websites. And when Adobe Go Live stopped making. A lot of people made the jump to Dreamweaver, but that's when I decided to really dig into coding websites myself. And I kind of went back and forth between two different programs. One of them was Coda and the other one was Espresso. And I ended up settling on Espresso. So every hand-coded website that I've done over the years was done in Espresso. And I absolutely love this program. Again, it's Mac only, but I absolutely love it. Now, I don't use it as much these days because, to be honest, most of my websites that I do are in WordPress. It's been years since I've hand-coded a brand new website. But I still, this morning, I mentioned that client that with that email list but with that email link that they want to remove from their website. Well, I fired up Espresso because that's where I built that website. It was so easy to go in there, remove that, update the website. Within 2 minutes, that link was gone. So if you are somebody who likes to code good with HTML, PHP, CSS, and all that stuff, check out Espresso. It's not very expensive. And it's a wonderful application. As I said, I only share things that I'm familiar with and use, and Espresso has been my go-to application for many, many years designing websites until I got onto WordPress, in which case now I just design in WordPress. But if you still do hand coding, check it out. You may be interested in it. And now on to today's topic. Be the expert everyone thinks you are. Now, are you an expert? Have you ever felt uncomfortable being referred to as an expert graphic designer or an expert web designer? Can I ask you why you might have felt that way? You know, I've seen it over and over, all over the place. Recently in the Resourceful Designer Facebook group. Small plug here, resourcefuldesigner.com/group if you want to join. Now, in that group, I've seen people talk about the fact that they were being called experts and they didn't feel comfortable with that. Designers actually cringe at that title because they don't feel they deserve it. Well, I want to tell you a little secret. Are you ready? You are an expert. It's true. Don't believe me? Here's what the Webster Dictionary defines as expert. An expert is someone having, involving, or displaying special skills or knowledge derived from training or experience. Let me give you a second to let that sink in. I'll even repeat it. An expert is someone having, involving, or displaying special skill or knowledge derived from training or experience. Now, with that definition in mind, let me ask you again. Are you an expert? Do you have, involve, or display special skills or knowledge derived from training or experience? I have a feeling the answer is yes. And if it is, then you are an expert. Now, I don't know why this term makes people feel so uncomfortable. And you know what? I have to admit, I used to be guilty of this as well. People would call me up and say, "Hi, Mark, so-and-so told me that you're a web design expert." Or, "Hey, Mark, I need a logo for my business, and I'm told you're the expert." It used to make me so uncomfortable. But you know what? Now I embrace that title. If someone asks me if I'm an expert, I proudly say, yes, I am. Allow me to shower you with my expertise. Well, okay, maybe I don't say that last bit, but I don't shy away from the title anymore. But why does this affect so many designers? Well, I'll tell you why. Because as designers, we're creative people. And being creative people, we're constantly learning to improve our skills and knowledge. But if we're constantly learning to improve our skills and knowledge, and there's always so much new to learn, how can we be experts? Well, the fact of the matter is, we are experts to everyone not in our industry. To everyone who doesn't understand the workings of a website, we are experts. To everyone who doesn't understand the intricacies of proper branding, we are an expert. To everyone who doesn't understand the nuances of type manipulation, of color usage, of page layout, we are an expert. Because we have skills and knowledge they don't possess. We are experts in their eyes. It's a matter of fact, so get used to it. You will be called an expert. Now, I want to share you a little story with you. This isn't about design, but bear with me. When I was 15 years old, my oldest brother was getting married. Now, my brother lived at the other end of Canada in Vancouver, British Columbia. And the wedding was to take place on December 27th, right after Christmas. So my parents decided and I went along, we went to spend our holidays on the West Coast. Anyways, we had a great Christmas. The wedding was beautiful. And then my brother and my new sister-in-law took off for a few days for their honeymoon, and they were planning on returning on New Year's Eve. Now, my grandmother and uncle lived in Victoria, British Columbia, which is on Vancouver Island. They had moved there several years earlier, and I hadn't seen my grandmother since. Now, she wasn't well enough to attend the wedding, so we made the arrangements to visit them while my brother and his new wife were away on their honeymoon. Now, Vancouver Island, for those who don't know, is only accessible by air or by water. And since my dad had rented a car for our stay on the West Coast, we decided to take the ferry. Now, shortly after debarking on Vancouver Island, we encountered a stoppage in traffic. There was just a huge lineup of cars. Now, I want to debunk a stereotype of Canada here. We are referred to as the Great White North, and we're proud of that moniker. However, that doesn't mean the whole country is constantly covered in snow. Here in Ontario, we get our fair share of snow during the winter months. And on the East Coast, they get a whopping amount of snow. Man, I don't envy them. But on the West Coast, the other end of Canada, it's a whole other story. In fact, other than its Olympic-grade mountains, British Columbia rarely sees any accumulation of snow in the winter. So my parents and I were on Vancouver Island, stuck in a line of cars, wondering what's going on. Well, eventually a police officer came up to our window and he told my dad that the highway to Victoria, the capital of British Columbia, was closed due to an unexpected snowfall. And he told us that the snowplow that usually is used to clear that highway had broken down, and they were waiting for another plow to come from the other side of the island, but it could be a couple of hours before it arrived. And we sat there dumbfounded. There was roughly maybe an inch and a half of snow on the ground at most, and yet everybody seemed to be in some sort of panic mode. Now, I remember sitting there a few minutes after the police officer told us this, and then my dad just got out of the car, and walked up to the police officer. Now, as my mom and I watched him for a bit, they started talking, and after a while, the police officer called over another police officer, and next thing you knew, there was a whole bunch of police officers all around my dad. Now, a couple of minutes passed, and then the group of police officers walked over to our car. They walked around our car. They looked at it, then they nodded to my dad, and my dad got back in the car. Without saying a word, the police officer motioned to my dad. He started the car, put it in gear, and he directed us onto the shoulder where we proceeded to drive past the entire line of stopped cars, past the barrier the police had erected in front of the line, and we were allowed onto the highway where we drove the 30 minutes to Victoria with the whole highway to ourselves. So what had happened? When my father approached the police officer, he asked why the highway was closed, and he was told that, well, an inch and a half of snow makes it way too dangerous to drive on. So calmly, my dad told the police officer that, hey, I'm from Ontario, and where we're from, they wouldn't even send the plows out for this little amount of snow. So the officer called his superior over, hence the discussion I had seen. And my dad pulled out his Ontario driver's license to show that proof that he is from Ontario. Then he showed that our rental car was equipped with snow tires. Now, snow tires are something common in Canada today, but back in 1984, snow tires weren't that common, but it was something my dad had insisted when he called to rent the car. He insisted the car had snow tires. So showing that to the police officers and his Ontario driver's license, they were convinced enough that the road conditions were not an obstacle for my dad, that they let us proceed when they stopped everybody else. So we had the entire highway to ourselves to drive to Victoria, and we drove it without any problem. We had a great visit with my grandmother and uncle, and then we returned afterwards. So you see, you don't have to know everything in order to be considered an expert. You only need to know more than the person asking the question or the person seeking your help. My dad was a good driver, but no more so than most other drivers I see on the road every single day. And by no means would I call him an expert driver, but to those police officers on Vancouver Island who were not used to driving on snow-covered roads, my father was just that. He was an expert. His credentials put him in a class of driver much higher than those officers were in, and in doing so, earned him their respect and acknowledgement, and bestowed a confidence in them that we would be okay driving on their snow-covered highway. So you see, it doesn't matter if you've been a designer for many, many years like I have, or if you're just getting into this profession. To everyone who relies on our skills, on our design knowledge, we are experts. So embrace it. Trust me, you want it this way, because how well do you think your business would do if your clients didn't think you were experts? I don't think I have to tell you the answer to that one, do I? And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. I would love to know how you normally feel when somebody calls you an expert. Leave me a comment by visiting the show notes page for this episode by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 69. And now, this week's question of the week. And this week's question comes in from Audrey. She says, "Hi, my name is Audrey and I'm from Sydney. I've been working as a graphic designer for 1 year. I'm an in-house graphic designer for a fashion brand, but I do freelance web design work outside of my daytime job. I have a question about how you do web design. Do you show your client a wireframe or just a high-fidelity mock-up? And do you use code as well to build a website like HTML and CSS? Or do you work with a developer to build a website? Also, lastly, what's the difference between web design and UI and UX?" Well, thank you for your question, Audrey, and congratulations on branching out and doing your own stuff on the side. I hope you're having a lot of fun doing the websites there in your freelance work. Now, in my business, I can tell you that I don't show my clients a wireframe. If you've been listening to the last few episodes, you know that first of all, I don't even use the term wireframe, but I never show them a wireframe or some sort of mock-up for a website. I always found website was a completely different monster than doing print design. With print design, I would design something up and then I would show a proof or 1 or 2, sometimes 3 proofs, but they would be rough. And I would always say they need to be tweaked up or something like that because the clients always want to get an idea of what something would look like. In my opinion, and this might just be me, in my opinion, when it comes to website design, clients rarely know what they want. When it comes to business cards, logos, flyers, brochures, trade show booths, they all have an inkling of what they want, and you kind of have to mold it or persuade them. If it's not a good idea, you persuade them otherwise. But again, when it comes to web design, I've found, in my opinion, most clients don't know what they want. They might have an idea that, I like the type of website that has a menu on the left-hand side, or I don't want that sort of thing, or I want a big hero image or slider at the top. But the overall look and design of a website, most clients don't know what they want. So the way I would do it is I would just figure it out on my own, sit down and build the website. Now, I would usually build one page, usually the home page. And again, it would be rough. I might have like filler copy in there and some stock images thrown in where real images will end up being later. But I will actually build the website or a home page. And if the other pages on the website are slightly different, I might build 2 pages. So if the home page has a certain look to it, but then every other web page on the website will have a different look, I'll build both of those pages. And then I will show it to the client. But at this point, the pages are pretty well done. If the client agrees to it, it's just a matter of swapping out the text and swapping out the photos. So it's not really a wireframe and it's not a mock-up of some sort. It's an actual website that is usable. It just, as I said, need to swap out some of the information on it. And I've found that system has worked for me since I've been doing websites. And I've rarely had any client come back and say, "Oh, no, I don't like that." Because again, in my opinion, most web design clients don't know what they want, as opposed to a print design client that has a good inkling of what they want. So that's the way I work. Now, I can say that my first maybe year or 2 when I was building stuff, this probably when I was hand coding, I would actually build the thing in Photoshop first. I would build exactly what I wanted the website to look like in Photoshop and show a static JPEG image of here's what your website will look like. Do you like this? So the first bunch of websites that I done back then were like that. And if the client liked it, it was already built in Photoshop. It was just a matter of slicing up all the images and then coding it and building from there. But nowadays, as I said, I use a lot of WordPress. In fact, most, if not all of my websites these days are built off WordPress. It's just so easy. So in most cases, I will just simply build the site or the first page, show it to them. At that point, if they want any changes, I can make some little tweaks here and there. If they don't like it, I can build them a completely new homepage or whatever. But that's never actually happened. And all the websites I've built since I started using WordPress, and I've been building the websites that way, since I started doing that, I've never had a client come back and say, oh, I don't like the design. It's just, I would design it and say, this is what your website's going to look like. Most of the time they'll look at it and just go, oh, wow, I love it. That's great. So much better than I thought. So then from there, I just keep going with the rest of the website. So that's the way I work. Now, I know that's not the way everybody else works, but that's the way I work. Now, my websites are mostly for small business. I haven't done very many huge corporate sites. I have done one or two, but most of the websites will be for small business. So I'm not talking about the $10,000, $20,000 websites. I'm talking more the $3,000 to $8,000 websites, and sometimes even less, depending on the site. I'm doing one site for somebody right now that's going to cost them probably $800 because really there's nothing to it. But as far as the other questions you asked, Audrey, I originally did everything in HTML, CSS. Then I moved down to PHP, although I didn't know PHP as well, but I used it just because of some of the functionalities that you can do with it. I would use PHP, but not with my SQL. I would just use the PHP mostly for the includes function, which allowed me to like build a footer, and then wherever I needed on a page, it was just a matter of including that footer file in there. And then if you had to change anything on the footer, you wouldn't have to change it on every single HTML page. You just changed it on that one PHP file and it would update the entire site, similar to the way WordPress works, but I was doing this by hand. But now, Audrey, as for developer, yes, I do use a developer if the website merits it. But to be honest, as I said, I'm doing mostly the small business websites, and a lot of those I don't need a developer for. The only time I get a developer involved is if there's something that I don't understand or I'm not capable of doing myself, in which case I do have a couple of developers that I will go to. And I do have to admit, I did use developers more when I was hand coding sites, because as I said, I didn't know PHP and MySQL as well. So if I needed something like that, I would go to a developer and get them to do something with that. And we would work together in building the sites. I would design the look and they would design the back end. But since switching to WordPress, most of the sites I end up doing myself or figuring out how to do it. And it's a case of, when I need to learn something, is it something I'm going to end up using in the future for other sites? Is it something that's going to help me out? If that's the case, then I'll learn how to do it. If it's something that I only need it for this one site and I can't see myself using it again on any other site in the future, then I will get somebody, either a developer or some sort of WordPress expert, to do that part of the website for me. And that's the way I work. And as to your last question, the difference between web design and UI or UX, I'm not the right person to ask, to be honest. I know what it is, user interface or user experience, and that, to be honest, I really don't know. These terms have popped up over the last few years, and to me, it's all web design. It's all intuition. It's all common sense. People are saying there's a user experience expert, and to me, that's something. It's a service that I've always offered. Like, from what I can tell, these people are saying, well, this is what they do. Well, that's just part of what I do when I build a website. You know, I make sure that the flow, everything makes sense. I make sure that all the buttons and the experience that the users have just makes sense, and it's common sense that you have buttons that take you where you need to be, and there's always a way out. And there's because I hate websites where you have to hit the back and back and back and back button. So I always make sure that everything just works that way. But as to what the difference is between them, to be honest, I just never bothered looking into it. I know there are people out there that's what their title is. They call themselves that. But as I said, in my opinion, it sounds like a lot of the stuff that I just do as a web designer. It's just not something I say I specialize in. Now, a lot of these people are also working on apps and other things like that, which I don't do. I looked into learning apps a couple of years ago, but I just realized that it was way too much of a learning curve and I didn't need to do that. There's a lot of other people that can do that if I ever need that service. But to be honest, I really don't know what the big difference is between web design and UI and UX. I simply call myself a web designer and I offer all the services that my clients need. So I hope that answers your question, Audrey. I do appreciate you sending that in. And if anybody else would like to have their question answered on a future episode of the podcast, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback and submit your question. Now, before I sign off today, I just want to share a very short iTunes review I got, another 5-star review. This one in the USA by TXEP3 is the name they put down. And it simply says, "Great resource. I was looking for a podcast about graphic design business and have enjoyed listening to this one. Short and sweet. So thank you for that. It's a short and sweet review. So thank you for that one. I do appreciate getting all of these. I love reading these reviews. So keep them coming. Simply visit resourcefuldesigner.com/iTunes and then click on the Leave a Review tab to leave yours. Now, before I go, I want to remind you of this week's resource, which is the program Espresso, which is only available for Mac. I'm sorry, but it is a wonderful program if you are coding websites in HTML, in PHP, in CSS, or not coding in CSS. Well, yeah, I guess you are coding in CSS, but it all integrates together, and it was my go-to. It's what I built. I can't even tell you how many websites I built using Espresso. And nowadays I am working more in WordPress, but I still have it around for a lot of my older sites, and I absolutely love that, and I do highly recommend it over, well, to be honest, other than that, and Coda was another good one, but I ended up using Espresso more. And to be honest, the only reason I ended up with Espresso more is because I had it when I was looking at the two different programs and which one to purchase. It ended up that I already had a copy of Espresso on my computer that I'd bought through a design bundle, and I didn't even remember. It's when I did a search for it, for some reason, I ended up searching the wrong search bar, and it showed up that I already had the application on my computer. So that's why I went with Espresso, but I used it for years. So that's it for this week. Thank you very much for tuning in. I always appreciate you tuning in and learning about running a graphic design business. It means a lot to me. And the kind reviews and the messages I receive from people in the Facebook group, I love seeing those as well. So until next time, I do wish you all the best in your graphic design business. I am Mark DeCote signing off, and as always, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.